I want to start today with a very specific feeling, a very particular sensation.
Okay.
I want you to picture this. It's a Tuesday afternoon. You're sitting at a desk, or maybe you're in your car driving home. And on paper, everything is fine.
Right.
In fact, everything is great. You're hitting your deadlines. You're being a quote unquote good person. You're, eating your kale. You're paying your taxes. You are checking every single box society ever gave you.
You're acing the success checklist.
Exactly. You've got the checklist and you've marked everything off with a thick black Sharpie. But then suddenly in the middle of that Tuesday, you get this sensation. It's not sadness, not really. It's not depression. It's just empty.
Yes.
It's like you're chewing a piece of gum and the flavor just vanished in a microsecond. You look at your life, this whole structure you've built so carefully, and it suddenly feels like a movie set.
Wow, yeah.
It looks real, but deep down, that if you lean on it, you'll fall right through.
That is a profound and incredibly disorienting experience.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it so scary for people is that it doesn't feel like a problem you can solve with the usual tools.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I have a flat tire, I need to change it.
Yeah.
It's more like, wait a minute, why am I even driving this car? Where does this road even go? Does it even exist?
Yes. And usually when we hit that wall, our knee-jerk reaction is to panic. We think, okay, I'm broken, something's wrong with me, I need to try harder, I need to be better at following the rules.
Double down on the strategy that's failing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today's deep dive is going to flip that completely on its head. We're looking at a text that suggests this feeling, this hollowness. It isn't a mistake. It's not a sign that you're failing.
Nope.
It's actually a signal that the entire architecture of your consciousness is about to collapse.
Yeah.
And that is a good thing.
It's a necessary thing.
Yeah.
A vital thing, even. Today, we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating paper titled From Authority to Participation by Kaia Solene. And I have to give you and our listeners a heads up. This isn't your standard, 5 ways to be happy listicle you find online.
Yeah.
This is heavy architectural psychology. It's a roadmap of how we grow up, not just physically, but internally.
It honestly felt like reading a blueprint of my own brain. It was uncanny. Now, Solene frames this whole journey specifically through the lens of what she calls intuitive introverts.
Right.
And I want to pause there for a second because I can hear half our audience reaching for the skip button thinking, well, that's not me. I'm an extrovert or I'm a sensor, so this doesn't apply.
Please don't hit skip. I really mean that.
Yeah, but
While she uses the intuitive introvert as her primary case study because they have a very specific and often very painful way of going through this process, the actual arc she describes is universal.
it's a human story.
It is. It's the movement from a rigid, top-down hierarchy of control to what she calls a living ecology of consciousness. So whether you're the life of the party or the person hiding in the bathroom at the party, you go through this shift. We all do.
So if you've ever felt like the rules you grew up with just stopped working one day, or if you've ever felt that disconnect between knowing the truth and actually living it, this deep dive is absolutely for you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to break down why being good eventually fails us, what happens when that internal boss in your head finally quits, and, how to survive the free fall that comes right after.
And we're going to look at why that free fall isn't the end. It's actually the path to a completely new way of operating. We're moving from architecture, something built, something rigid, to ecology, something that's grown and alive and responsive.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this. We have to start where we all start. Solene calls this the early structure, and she labels this whole phase authority and ego.
Right. And it's so important that we're careful here not to demonize this phase. In our current culture, authority is almost a dirty word.
Oh yeah, we all want to be rebels. We want to question authority.
Exactly. But Solene makes a crucial point right at the beginning. You cannot transcend a structure you haven't built yet.
It's the scaffolding argument. You can't build a skyscraper without that steel frame first.
You can't.
If you try to just, flow with life, when you're 3 years old, you're just going to walk straight into traffic.
Exactly. In early psychological life, the ego, the part of you that says, I am, is unformed. It's soft. It's porous. It needs a container, a structure to hold it together and give it orientation. So authority steps in.
And what does that look like at first?
Initially, it's all external. Parents, teachers, religious figures, the culture at large. They provide the north on the compass. They tell you what is up, what is down, what is safe, and what is dangerous.
This is the download phase of life. You aren't writing the code for your brain. You're just installing the operating system your parents and society gave you.
That's a great way to put it, a perfect analogy. And the primary function of this OS is safety and orientation.
Yeah.
And the mechanism that keeps this whole system running is a very specific, very simple type of morality. It's rule-based. It's totally binary.
The good boy, bad boy dynamic.
Yep.
Or good girl, bad girl.
Yes. You are good by alignment. If the rule says make your bed, and you make your bed, you are good. You get the reward. If you don't, you are bad. It's clean. It's simple. And the regulator, the little piece of code that keeps you on the tracks, is guilt.
Guilt is the electric fence. I remember this so vividly from being a kid. It wasn't even about whether the action itself made logical sense. It was just, did I cross the line? Zap. Okay, I won't do that again.
Precisely. Guilt is just a feedback mechanism for an external authority. It's incredibly efficient. But here's where Solene zooms in on that intuitive introvert personality type.
Okay.
She argues that for these specific people, this structure, it gets internalized very, very early.
Yeah.
And it gets internalized in a different way than it does for, say, an extroverted sensor.
This part of the paper really hit home for me. She talks about how, for some kids, it's not just, I'm afraid mom will yell at me if I break the vase. It becomes something much more abstract. The authority moves inside the head.
The boss moves into the corner office of your mind. You see, intuitive introverts naturally deal in concepts, in patterns, in ideals. So they don't just internalize mom's voice. They internalize the principle of perfection. They internalize the ideal of truth. The authority becomes principled, abstract, and absolute.
Which sounds noble on the surface, but in practice, it's actually a nightmare.
It is an absolute nightmare because you can hide from your mom. You can wait until she leaves the room to steal the cookie from the jar, but you cannot hide from an abstract principle that lives in your own frontal lobe.
There's nowhere to run.
Nowhere. The
Wow.
control becomes subtle, but it is total. You're being watched by your own mind 24/7.
It's like having a micromanager living in your brain, but the micromanager is also a moral philosopher who is constantly, and I mean constantly, disappointed in you.
That is a terrifyingly accurate description. And Solene links this directly to the relationship between the ego and the self. Now, we need to define our terms here because these words get thrown around a lot.
Yeah, let's be clear.
When Solene uses self with a capital S, she means the larger wholeness, the organizing principle of your entire being. Jung calls it the God image within. It's the totality of you.
Okay, so ego is the little me that's navigating the day, paying bills, driving the car, feeling anxious. Self is the big me, the soul, the total system.
Correct. Now, in this early authority phase, the ego and the self are estranged. They haven't really met each other yet. The ego projects the self outward or upward.
What do you mean by projects?
We see wholeness or truth as something distant from us. It's God up in the sky. It's the PhD you're striving for in the future. It's the perfect soulmate who you believe will finally complete you. Meaning is imported from above or from out there.
So life becomes a ladder. We're down here in the mud, and all the good stuff is up there in a high shelf, and the only way to get to that shelf is to climb the ladder of rules.
Yes, the ego survives by obedience to that projection. If I work hard enough, if I'm spiritual enough, if I'm fit enough, then one day I will finally ascend and touch the self. I will be whole.
And the whole time, that sense of wholeness feels like it's somewhere else.
Always somewhere else. And again, I want to stress this because it's so important. This is not a pathology. It is a necessary developmental step. You need to strive. You need to build that container, that ego structure.
But then the container starts to leak.
It does.
And this brings us to part 2 of the outline, the crisis. And honestly, reading this part was deeply uncomfortable because it felt so familiar. Solene describes this transition out of the authority phase not as some big explosion, but as a slow collapse.
It's the termite infestation, not the bomb.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that your life falls apart on the outside. You might still have the job, the house, the family, but inside the engine it stops turning over. Solene says guilt loses its power. Can we dwell on that for a second? Because we usually think of guilt as this awful thing we want to get rid of, but when it goes away unexpectedly, it's actually terrifying.
It is terrifying because guilt were your compass. It told you where north was. North is where I don't feel guilty. When that mechanism fails, you completely lose your orientation.
You're just adrift.
Completely. Imagine you break a rule. Let's say you decide to slack off at work for a day, or you tell a white lie to a friend. In the old structure, you'd feel that electric zap of guilt. But suddenly, you feel nothing. Or even worse, you follow the rules perfectly. You work the 60-hour week, you get the promotion, and you wait for the reward. That feeling of goodness, and it's just air. There's nothing there.
That's the moment. The check clears, but the satisfaction bounces.
Exactly. It's a profound alienation, disenchantment. Solene calls this an existential structural failure. And the core realization, the thing you finally have to face, is that the old authority isn't necessarily wrong. It's not that being hardworking is suddenly bad. It's just that it is no longer alive for you.
It's a dead letter.
It is. Obedience no longer guarantees meaning. You realize that you can be perfectly aligned with every authority figure in your life, inside and out, and still be completely, utterly miserable.
This is that moment. The intuitive introvert looks at their internal perfect principles and basically says, you promised me happiness if I followed you. I did everything you asked. I followed you. I sacrificed for you. And I'm empty. It feels like a massive betrayal.
It is a betrayal. The ego feels scammed, totally ripped off. And this leads to what Solene calls the withdrawal of projection. Remember how we said the self or truth was projected outward or upward?
Yeah, the truth is out there.
Well, suddenly that entire structure collapses.
Yeah.
The projection snaps back like a stretched rubber band. The external world loses its magic, its numinosity, to use the technical term. Authority loses its glow.
So you start to see things as they are.
You realize your brilliant boss is just a guy trying to hit a KPI. You realize the enlightened guru is just a person with their own unprocessed trauma. The ego can no longer outsource meaning to a leader, or a political party, or a rule book.
You left holding the bag, and the bag is empty.
And you are standing in a void. A complete vacuum.
Yeah.
Now, Solene points out 3 specific dangers here, because when people hit this void, they usually freak out and grab onto the first thing they can.
The escape hatches.
Exactly. Danger number 1 is nihilism. The rules are fake, God is dead, nothing matters, so what's the point? I'm just going to lie on the couch and rot.
It's the rebellious teenager phase, but it's happening in your 40s.
Correct. Danger number 2 is spiritual bypassing. This is a very common one in our culture. You feel the emptiness and it's too painful to bear, so you immediately grab a new, shiny set of rules. Maybe it's a new strict diet or a rigid spiritual practice or a political ideology.
Right.
You basically paste a love and light bumper sticker over the gaping hole in your soul so you don't have to look at it anymore.
I'm not having an existential crisis. I'm just manifesting abundance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the third danger, and this is the most subtle and seductive one for the intuitive types, is inflation.
Inflation. So this is like a big ego trip.
Yes, but it's a very specific kind. Since the God projection has collapsed from the sky and it's fallen back into you, the ego looks around and says, hey, wait a minute. Nobody is in charge up there, so I must be God.
Whoa.
The ego confuses itself with the self. You start thinking your personal insights are absolute truth. You become rigid, arrogant, and completely untouchable.
I am the captain now.
Yes, that's the one. But, and this is the hopeful part, Solene argues that if you can avoid those craps, if you can endure this alienation consciously, if you can just sit in that empty room without panicking and without trying to fill it with new furniture, this is the threshold of transformation.
So the advice is don't panic. The emptiness is a feature, not a bug.
It is the necessary clearing of the construction site so that something new and alive can be built, or rather, so it can be grown.
Which brings us beautifully to part 3, the descent. And I love this imagery because we spend the first half of our lives trying to ascend, to get to the high ideals, to get to the corner office, to get to heaven. But Solene says the next step is down, from transcendence to immanence.
This is the crucial pivot of the entire journey. In the authority phase, meaning comes from above. In this new phase, meaning enters experience. It descends into the body. It descends into the messy, muddy, complicated reality of right now.
Okay, that sounds really poetic, but I want to ground it.
Well,
What does meaning enters the body actually feel like? What's the lived experience of that?
it means truth is no longer something you think about. It's something you are. It becomes incarnate. It's the difference between reading a book about love and actually being in love.
Oh, okay.
Solene writes that in this shift, the ego gets a promotion, or maybe a demotion, depending on how you look at it. In the first phase, the ego is a servant to the rules.
Right.
In the crisis phase, the ego tries to become the ruler. That's inflation. But in this new phase, the ego becomes a participant.
A participant. That word feels so different from boss or slave. It feels collaborative.
Think about the difference. A ruler tries to control the outcome. A servant just waits for orders. A participant is deeply involved, responding to what is happening right now, using their unique skills, but also recognizing they are part of a larger flow that they didn't create and can't control.
It reminds me of the difference between, say, driving a car with a GPS shouting directions at you versus driving a car on a racetrack where you know the road so well, you stop thinking about driving and you just You just flow through the curves.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
When you are in the zone driving that car, are you controlling it? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But are you also responding to the road, to the tires, to the engine? Yes. The separation between you and the driving disappears. That's what Solene calls lived non-duality.
Okay, we need to stop the bus right here. Non-duality. This is a huge spiritual buzzword that gets thrown around, and usually it sounds like you have to evaporate into a cloud of white light and lose your personality. Is that what she means?
I am so glad you asked that, because that is the common and, I think, unhelpful misconception. Solene is very, very grounded on this point. She is emphatic. This is not ego annihilation. We need the ego.
Thank you.
You need a self to pay your taxes, choose a sandwich for lunch, to love your children. Non-duality in this context simply means the rigid separation between the knower, you, and the known life begins to soften.
So I don't disappear into the cosmos.
No, you just become more porous. The text says the ego remains indispensable, but its authority fundamentally changes. It no longer claims authorship over life. It responds to life. Action arises from alignment with what is occurring, not just from an intellectual choice or a pre-written rule book.
So instead of asking, what does the rule book say I should do right now, you start to ask, what does this moment, this situation require of me?
Exactly. It moves from a static, prepackaged morality to a dynamic living responsiveness.
That sounds lovely, but also incredibly messy. The rule book was safe. What the moment requires sounds risky and uncertain. And Solene doubles down on this risk in part 4, because she says this whole transformation doesn't happen on a quiet mountaintop. It happens in the mud and the fire of our relationships.
Relational non-duality, the field between us. This is where the rubber truly meets the road, because the stereotype of the wise sage is the solitary monk meditating in a cave. And you know what? It's pretty easy to be non-dual when you are all alone.
Right. I can be totally one with the universe when nobody's asking me to do the dishes or talking during the movie.
Laughs. Exactly. But Solene says, no, get out of the cave. Real transformation, sustainable transformation, moves into the interpersonal field. She argues that true unity isn't found by withdrawing from the world, but by finding presence with indifference.
Presence with indifference. Okay, that sounds great on a Hallmark card, but what does that actually mean in practice? If I'm arguing with my spouse about finances, I don't want presence with indifference. I want them to agree with me. I want to win.
And that very desire to win is the old authority structure kicking back in. The ego wants to dominate or prove it's right. Presence with indifference means staying connected to yourself and to the other person, even when the tension is incredibly high. It means holding that tension without snapping the bond. Solene calls relationship the crucible, a vessel where heat and pressure are applied. Something new can emerge, she says, through sustained presence and tension.
That sounds incredibly hard. Like maybe the hardest thing.
It is the hardest thing. And this is where she brings those personality types back into the picture.
Yeah.
Because different brains have different default reactions to that kind of tension.
Okay, let's play this out. Let's say a couple is fighting about something real. The tension is rising. The stress is high. What happens?
Well, if you are a thinking type, your primary defense against tension is logic. You want to argue the facts. You spent X amount on this, the budget is Y, therefore you are factually wrong. Vulnerability feels incredibly unsafe, so you build a fortress of facts and logic around yourself. You detach.
It's that cold, hard logic. I'm not yelling, I'm just stating facts. It's infuriating.
Exactly. Now, if you are a feeling type, your priority is harmony. The tension itself feels like a threat to your survival, so you might placate. You might apologize when you haven't done anything wrong just to make the bad feelings go away, or you might get emotionally flooded and attack in order to get a reaction, to reestablish some kind of connection, even a negative one.
Okay, and what about the intuitive introverts? Our case study group, what's their move?
Their struggle is very specific. They live in a world of fast, fluid, interconnected insights, but real relationships are slow. They are imprecise. People misunderstand you. It's messy. So the intuitive introvert's tendency is to retreat, to just leave.
How do you mean leave?
You don't get it. This is too slow and frustrating, so I'm leaving.
Yeah.
They might physically stay in the room, but mentally, they are gone. They've retreated into their own head.
Guilty as charged. It would take way too long to explain this, so I'll just go to my mind palace and figure it out myself.
It's a defense mechanism, a very powerful one. But Solene's reframing is brilliant here. She says these tensions aren't personal failures. If you and your partner are fighting, it's not because you are bad at relationships. These are functions seeking integration within a shared field. The friction is necessary. It provides the heat, that creates the change.
That reframing helps a lot. It stops me from thinking, oh, we're fighting, this relationship is broken, and it starts making me think, okay, we're fighting, what function is trying to emerge here? What's trying to be integrated?
It changes the entire goal of the conflict from winning to integration. And this relational shift has a profound effect on how we view morality itself. This is part 5, the transformation of morality.
We talked earlier about the death of guilt, and I have to be honest, when I read that phrase, a little alarm bell went off in my head. If we kill guilt, don't we just become sociopaths? If I don't feel bad about stealing, what's to stop me from stealing?
That is the common fear, and it's an understandable one. If I let go of the leash, the dog will bite everyone. But we have to understand what guilt is structurally. Guilt is the fear of punishment by the big other, the external authority.
Right.
It is fundamentally external. When authority moves inside, when it becomes part of the lived, felt, whole guilt becomes obsolete. It's like using a fax machine when you have email. It's just the wrong technology for the job.
So what replaces the fax machine? What's the new technology?
The conscience. But Solene defines conscience very, very specifically. It is not judgment. It is not an inner critic. It is felt coherence.
Felt coherence. I'm going to need an analogy for that one.
Imagine you're playing in a jazz band. You're all in the groove, you're jamming. If you play a sour note, a note that totally clashes with the harmony, you don't feel guilty in the sense that you think you're a sinner who deserves to go to musician jail.
No.
You feel misalignment.
Yeah.
You feel a physical contraction. You feel that you have fallen out of the pocket, out of the flow.
It's like a stone in your shoe. It just feels wrong. It's dissonant.
Yes. Misalignment isn't a moral failure in the old religious sense. It is a loss of presence. It is a rupture in the relational field. And here's the kicker, and this is so important. This new standard is actually harder than the old one.
How can it possibly be harder? No guilt sounds like a vacation.
Because there are no loopholes. In the old system, if the rule says don't steal and you don't steal, you are good. You're done.
Yeah.
You can secretly hate your neighbor. You can manipulate them. You can be cruel in all sorts of subtle legal ways. But as long as you don't take his lawnmower, you follow the rule. You are safe.
You win on a technicality.
Right. But in the stage of conscience, of felt coherence, you have to feel the consequences of your actions directly.
Right.
You have to feel the impact of your cruelty on the field. You have to be present to the pain you cause, not because a rule book says so, but because you are fundamentally connected to the other person. You can't loophole your way out of felt coherence.
Oof. Yeah, that is definitely harder. It requires a kind of total moment-to-moment honesty.
And for the introvert, this is a very specific struggle. The world still expects the old signals of morality. If you mess up, people want you to perform guilt. They want to see you grovel. They want to see you publicly shame yourself.
Right.
But if you are operating from this new level, your internal guide is much quieter. It's exacting, but it's not performing for an audience. You correct the behavior because of the internal feeling of misalignment, not to appease the external judge.
It's the difference between a child saying, I'm sorry because mom is glaring at them, versus an adult saying, I need to fix this because they realize they broke something valuable.
That is the perfect distinction. And that internal shift leads us right into part 6, where Solene redefines some very heavy Jungian concepts, the individual and the shadow.
Okay.
We usually think of the individual as me versus the world, separation. But Solene says at this stage of development, the individual is not about separation. It is about differentiation.
Break that down for me. Separation versus differentiation.
Okay, think of a single wave and the ocean. The wave is clearly differentiated. It has a specific shape, a specific height, a specific location. You can point to it and say, that is a wave. But is it ever truly separated from the ocean?
No, of course not. If you take the water out, the wave vanishes. It's made of the ocean.
Exactly. We are the unique way that wholeness articulates itself.
Right.
We are the wave. We are differentiated, but we are not cut off.
I like that. That makes sense. But then what about the shadow? Usually when we hear shadow work, we think about digging up deep, dark, repressed secrets. You know, murderous rage, the monster in the basement of our psyche.
The Freudian sack of repressed nastiness. Solene offers a much more elegant, more ecological definition. She calls the shadow unmetabolized participation.
Unmetabolized participation. That sounds like a digestion problem.
In a way, it is. It means the places where your awareness has not yet entered the relationship. It's not necessarily some dark, evil desire you're hiding. It appears as a blind spot. It appears in the moments where you check out.
Can you give me a concrete example? Because unmetabolized participation is still a bit abstract for me.
Sure. Let's go back to that fight with your spouse. Your spouse is expressing something very emotional. Maybe they're crying, sharing something vulnerable, and you, feeling overwhelmed by it, you glaze over. You start looking at your phone, or you start thinking about your grocery list. You have physically stayed in the room, but your participation has stopped. You are no longer metabolizing the moment.
So the shadow isn't just the monster under the bed, it's the moment I zone out because I'm uncomfortable.
Yes, that withdrawal, that checking out, is a shadow manifestation. It is a rupture in the field. It is the place where you are refusing to metabolize the reality of the moment.
Right.
So shadow work isn't just digging for childhood trauma. It's noticing in real time where you go unconscious in your daily life and bringing presence back to that exact spot. Oh, wow, I just checked out. Let me come back.
That feels incredibly practical. It takes the spooky, dramatic factor out of shadow work and makes it about paying attention.
Precisely. It brings it right into the now.
Okay, stick with us, everyone, because we are about to enter the most technical, but I honestly think the most important part of Solene's entire framework. This is part 7. She calls it the question refines. It's the crucial distinction between awareness and function.
This is the hinge upon which the whole thing turns. If you miss this piece, you get stuck in inflation. If we are really living this non-dual reality, we have to ask a very precise question. What is the difference between the awareness that sees everything and the specific tools we use to navigate the world, like thinking or intuition?
Awareness versus function. Okay, let's define them one at a time.
Solene defines awareness as the open field where experience appears. It is the screen on which the movie of your life plays. It is non-selective. The screen doesn't care if the movie is a comedy or a horror film. It just holds the image. It is already whole. And here is the key point that changes everything. Awareness does not improve with development. It does not need repair.
Wait, hold on. That's huge. We spend all this time and money trying to fix ourselves, but you're saying the core part of us, awareness, doesn't need fixing at all.
You don't need to polish the sky. You might need to clear the clouds away, but the sky itself is always untouched. Awareness is simply the capacity to notice. But the functions, thinking, feeling, sensing, intuition, those are different. These are differentiated movements within awareness.
They're the weather moving through the sky.
Yes. And specifically, Solene calls them conditioned return paths.
Conditioned return paths. Okay, unpack that phrase.
A function is a tool the ego uses to restore a sense of coherence when it feels fragmented or lost. When you feel disoriented, your brain instinctively grabs a specific tool to try and get back to safety. That default tool is your dominant function.
It's the panic button you hit.
It's the flashlight you grab. Imagine you are suddenly plunged into a dark room. That's disorientation. You frantically search for a flashlight to see. That flashlight is your dominant function. If you are a thinker, you grab the logic flashlight. If you are an intuitive, you grab the insight flashlight.
And the problem comes when we confuse the flashlight with the sun.
Exactly. If you think your little flashlight is the light source of the entire universe, you are in big trouble. You start thinking your logic is God. You start thinking your intuition is absolute truth. That is the very definition of inflation.
You mistake the map for the territory.
Awareness is the sun. It illuminates everything equally without preference. Functions are flashlights. We plant them at specific things to make sense of them. And functions do need repair. They need to be sharpened, cleaned, integrated with the others. Awareness just is.
This helps explain why people get so incredibly defensive about their way of seeing the world. They think their way is the only way because they've confused their personal function with reality itself.
Precisely. And this leads us directly to part 8, the type dynamics. And I want to spend some real time here because this is where listeners can really start to self-diagnose. So Solene breaks down exactly how different brains use these functions, these flashlights, to restore order when the chips are down.
Okay, let's build a scenario. A high-stakes one, let's say. There's a massive, chaotic restructuring at work. Rumors are flying everywhere, jobs are on the line, nobody knows what's happening, the old structure has totally collapsed. How do the different types react? Let's start with our main subject, the intuitive introvert.
Okay. For the intuitive introvert, psychological safety equals meaning or pattern. They need to know why this is happening and where it fits in the grand scheme of things. So in this chaos, their disorientation feels like nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
It feels like a bad dream where the plot is gone.
I've lost the plot. That's the feeling.
Right. So their return path, the way they try to get back to safety, is through insight or reframing. They will almost certainly withdraw. They'll go for a long walk or sit in their office with the door closed for an hour. They are frantically trying to spin a new narrative. Okay, this restructuring isn't random. It's actually a symptom of the larger economic shift to AI, and it means I need to pivot my career toward X.
They need an epiphany, the aha moment. Once they have the epiphany, aha, I see the pattern, they feel safe again. Even if the epiphany is bad news, just the act of understanding it brings them relief.
Exactly. Coherence is restored through having a clear vision. Now, contrast that with the thinking type in the same situation.
The logician.
For them, coherence equals logical consistency. A equals A. The rules of physics must apply. In this restructure, their disorientation feels like contradiction. Management said X last week, but now they're doing Y today. That is illogical. It does not compute.
It feels like the world is fundamentally broken, like 2 + 2 suddenly equals 5.
Yes. So their return path is clarification and distinction. They don't need a grand sweeping vision. They need precise definitions. They are the ones raising their hand in the big town hall meeting asking, can you provide the specific criteria for the layoffs? Can you please define essential personnel? I need to see the data.
They're trying to build a bridge of logic over the chaotic waters. If I can categorize everything correctly, I will be safe.
Correct. Now let's look at the feeling type in that same meeting.
The empath. The tribe builder.
For them, coherence is all about value alignment and resonance. Are we good? Is the tribe safe? Is there harmony and care in the system? In the restructure, their disorientation feels like a deep betrayal. How can they do this to us? I thought we were a family here. This feels so cold and heartless.
It's a rupture in the human fabric of the place.
Absolutely. So their return path is connection and authenticity. They need to reestablish the emotional bond. They might be the ones crying in the break room, or the ones organizing a happy hour after work to keep everyone together, or the ones venting passionately about how unfair and wrong the bosses are. They are trying to restore the feeling of humanity to the situation.
This is fascinating because you can see in this one example how these 3 types would drive each other absolutely crazy in a crisis.
Oh, completely. The thinker looks at the feeler and says, stop crying, your emotions don't solve the problem, look at the spreadsheet. The feeler looks back at the thinker and says, you are a heartless robot. How can you look at a spreadsheet when people are hurting?
And the intuitive introvert is just standing in the corner, staring at the wall, mumbling something about the paradigm shift of the 4th Industrial Revolution, and everyone just wants to punch them.
Exactly, because everyone is using their own specific flashlight to try and find the door out of the dark room, and they're all annoyed that other people are pointing their lights in completely different directions.
And Solene's massive, crucial takeaway here is none of these functions are the truth. None of those flashlights are the sun.
That is the tough pill we all have to swallow. My logic is not God. Your feeling is not God. My intuition is not God. They are just the specific, conditioned tools our specific egos use to get back to a feeling of center. They are partial. They are useful, but they are partial.
Realizing that it's incredibly humbling. It means my first gut-level reaction to a crisis cannot be trusted to be the whole picture.
And that humility is the gateway to the final stage she describes. Part 9. Mature coherence. What does it look like when we finally grow up and integrate all of this?
I imagine it must look like a profound sense of relief.
It looks like relaxation. In mature integration, awareness is finally recognized as the ground of being, and the functions are recognized as instruments. The hammer finally realizes it's just a hammer, and a very good one.
So it doesn't have to try to be the carpenter anymore.
Right, and because of that, it doesn't have to pound everything it sees. Solene talks about a fundamental shift in usage. The leading functions say your intuition no longer claims absolute authority. It stops insisting it must be in charge of every decision. And the secondary, less developed functions are finally welcome to the table.
So the intuitive introvert stops needing to be the smartest person in the room who has the big singular insight that saves the day.
Yes. They can allow their intuition to just be a suggestion. Hey, I'm seeing a pattern here. Maybe it's useful, maybe it's not. What do you all think? And they genuinely allow other functions in. The intuitive allows thinking to check their facts. The thinker allows feeling to inform their logic. Okay, this plan makes logical sense, but does it feel right? Does it align with our values?
The functions become situational rather than identity-based.
That is the key phrase. So instead of, I am a thinker, which is an identity, it's, I am using thinking right now because this particular problem requires logic.
You are the user of the tool, not the tool itself.
Exactly. And this leads to what she calls shared orientation. Functions stop being private defense mechanisms we use to protect ourselves and become gifts we offer to the collective. Intuition becomes mutual sensing. Thinking becomes collective clarification. Feeling becomes shared resonance.
We stop using our superpowers to protect ourselves and start using them to help the relationship or the team or the family.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Solene calls this the final humility for the intuitive introvert in particular, to trust awareness enough that their intuition no longer has to be right.
Oh man, that sounds like such a relief, to let go of the burden of having to be right, to not have to figure it all out by yourself.
Insight yields to presence. Participation replaces foresight. You see, the intuitive introvert loves foresight. We want to predict the future so we can feel safe. But Solene says, stop trying to predict. Just participate. Be here now. And here is the paradox she ends on. Your intuition actually becomes more accurate precisely because you stop insisting that it must be absolute.
Because you aren't forcing it. You aren't gripping the steering wheel so tight anymore.
You're just listening. And that is what true participation is. It's listening to the song of life so closely that you can play your part perfectly without ever having to write the music yourself.
Wow. Okay, let's zoom out and just look at this whole epic journey one last time. We started with authority. The external rules, the electric fence of guilt, the safety of being a good person.
Right. Then came the crisis. The gum lost its flavor. The rules failed. The emptiness hit.
Then the descent meaning came down from the sky into the body. The ego stopped trying to be the boss and learned to be a participant.
We moved out of the solitary cave into the messy reality of relationships. We replaced guilt with conscience. That felt coherence. And we learned the crucial technical skill of distinguishing our functions, our flashlights, from awareness, the sun.
And the final destination isn't a place where you are perfect or enlightened. It's a place where you are coherent. It's a living ecology. You aren't a stone statue anymore. You're a garden.
Beautifully put. I couldn't say it better.
So what does this all mean for the listener right now? If they're listening to this and thinking, oh God, I'm so in the crisis right now, or I am definitely shadow boxing with my partner every night, what is the big takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is validation and relief. Solene's model tells us that the confusion and pain you might be feeling isn't a mistake. It's movement. It's a growth pain. And the ultimate relief is knowing that awareness is what you are and your functions are just how you move. You don't have to become awareness. You already are it. You just have to stop confusing your flashlight with the sun.
It takes all the pressure off. You don't have to be the CEO of your life anymore. You just have to be a really good participant.
Conscious participant, yes.
I want to leave everyone with a thought that came up for me while reading the very last part of the paper. Solene suggests that when we finally start confusing awareness and functions finally know what they are for.
It's a beautiful line, isn't it?
It's incredible. So here's the question for you to mull over this week. If you stop trying to use your thinking or your intuition or your caretaking to control your life, to keep yourself safe, or to prove that you are good, what specific, beautiful contribution might those functions make to the people around you instead? What if your logic wasn't a shield, but a gift you could offer?
That is the whole journey, from defense to contribution.
So observe your own return paths this week. When the stress hits, notice what you grab for. Notice if you grab the spreadsheet or the silence or the venting session, and just see if you can hold it a little more lightly. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you in the field.
Catch you next time.